Good day, everyone. Scooter here at Granville Guitars, coming to you live from the Granville Guitars World Headquarters here in lovely St. Petersburg, Florida. Today I want to talk to you about an incredible, wonderful circuit from George Metropoulos over there at Metropoulos Amplification. This is his Zero Loss Effects loop for, well, a lot of different amplifiers, frankly, but he's designed it mostly to go in Marshalls. I had to shuck and jive a little bit just to figure it out to go into this particular Marshall, because as we'll pan out and see, this is not your typical Marshall. This is a so-called horizontal jack with the pots mounted to the board. So our conundrum here was twofold. First of all, I had to figure out where to acquire the B+ voltage necessary to power the board and add a coupling resistor to bring that voltage down where it needed to be. And there's a couple of places you can do it. I have elected to do it down towards in this particular amp, it has two resistors that are generally in a vintage Marshall side by side. That would be this one here, which has been changed to a different value, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And that's R29 in this one, and R8 is the other one right over here. Now I should go ahead and tell you, this is a 1997 Guitar Center Special Edition. This was one of the last 200 of these made with the original JCM 800 transformers, but it still bears a lot of resemblance to the 800s that were being produced at the time, being that it's got the board mounted jacks and pots. The electrons don't care. It sounds like an 800, and it sounds really, really good. One of the portions of the instructions that was a little, well, let's go back to where I was talking about the power rail here for a second. Typically the power rail will establish its connection, if I can zoom in here and get a decent angle so you can see it. It will establish its connection right in here on the other side of this capacitor, and you would, the coupling resistor would get attached right there. Well, in this case I've added a wire because that resistor needs to go closer to where it's actually attached, and we'll see it way up there. That is also a PI rail resistor right there, but it's closer to the preamp. This connection right here at that side, the tube side of R8, that's where I acquired my my voltage. Okay. And this is the stepping down resistor, if you will, or coupling resistor, the dropping resistor, that's going to drop that voltage down to what this board wants to see. I've attached it one leg here, and then the other wire, I've run it through this little hole right here on the board, and run it all the way back over to the board. And that's how we're acquiring power for the zero loss. Now, as to signal, if we look over here, you can see the in and out of the board. The blue and yellow wires are attached to the bypass switch, and those heavily shielded wires are going back over to the board. Now, normally you would pull the wire that's going to the treble pot, which is right here, that marked treble, VR3. Well, there is no wire going to the treble pot because it's a printed circuit board design. You also have to interrupt a wire that goes to the master volume. Fortunately, at some point in the design process of this amplifier, I'm not entirely certain, but it's obvious, right there where you can see R14, that in this amp was a jumper. Okay, on one side of the jumper is the connection, or the connection that's typically from the treble wiper, usually goes to here, and there's a jumper that moves to here and then connects to the master volume. This is tailor-made for you to install the zero loss. Okay, This part right here, where it says R14, that is the connection. If you remove the jumper, that connects to the master volume pot to the proper connection with no muss, no fuss. The other side connects to the treble wiper, the center pin, with no muss and no fuss. So you remove the jumper at R14, okay, and then you hook the lead from the switch, the bypass switch that gets mounted on the back of the chassis. You connect that here, soldering it on the underside of the board, just as it says in the instructions. And then the other side, let's see if I can swing around and get a look at that too from the other side. The other side is right here on the other side of that R14 jumper. Okay, you can see that the shields to these two wires have been twisted together, and I've run a ground wire, okay, that I've also shielded here, and it goes to an eyelet that's typically it was soldered over, but it's right here next to the V in VR2 right there. That's the ground bus. So this becomes your ground wire. This is a wire you would normally run to the back of the pots, or that bus wire that's normally back there on a vintage Marshall. This amp doesn't have that, so you have to connect it there. And this is the ideal place to connect it, because since your hot is going to the master, and over here obviously you would want this typically grounded to the treble, but they're close enough together where that it doesn't seem to bother it. It performs flawlessly and sounds great, and it's dead quiet. So this worked out perfectly. So in summary, for these two wires that in the instructions you're instructed to take from the switch, okay, and those connections are outlined in the instructions for the zero loss. The other ends of those wires, the wire intended to go, you need to lift the jumper at R14. This side here, right where it says R14, that's the connection to the master volume pot. The other side is the connection to the wiper, or pin 2, the middle of the treble pot, and that's where you need to make those connections. That way you don't have to. I understand some people have done this addition to this amp, and you can do it this way by removing the board, desoldering the treble pot and the master pot, flipping them over, and running wires for everything. Well, that's a little complicated, isn't it? And it certainly doesn't help matters soldering and desoldering things. So this allows you to remove this jumper wire at R14 and make your two connections, and then just run a ground wire over here to the master. So they've given you everything you need. You just have to dig through the schematics and the actual construction of the amplifier to see what's going on. I'll lift this out of the way so you can see there. At R14, the two connections. The upper connection towards the pots, that connection takes you to the treble. Again, I'm repeating this again in case it hasn't soaked in and somebody's kind of lost. This is going to connect you to the treble pot as outlined in the instructions. This side will connect you to the master volume as outlined in the instructions for the V4 version 4 zero loss effects loop. Okay, so those are the connections you need to make. This is how I did the power. There are a variety of other ways you could do it. This way I thought was going to be the most sensible. It's secure. I've got this tail wrapped around this resistor here, and it's all shrunk wrapped together, so it's not going anywhere. And I also ran this wire for the B+. If you can see it underneath there, I ran it through this hole in the board, so it's not going to move around too much. It's going to stay pretty steady. That was kind of it. I just really wanted to elaborate on how this install goes. Once again, I want to tell everyone what a great device this thing is. Not a fan of effects loop circuits in general. This one is absolutely fantastic. It changes the tone as long as you install it properly and set it properly. It changes the tone not one tiny little bit, not at all. I can't say that about a whole lot of other effects loop circuits, but George just kind of knocked this one out of the park. I'm a believer. I bought one for myself. This is for a customer, and I may put this in an amp of my own. That's how much I like it. So there you go. It turned out absolutely fantastic, and if you have any questions about the zero loss, you need to refer those to our good friends over there at Metropoulos Amplifiers. I'll put a link in the description so you can seek them out. But this is a very nice addition to a Marshall, any Marshall amp that you need an effects loop for. And effects loops are kind of fun if you want to have modulation effects, reverbs, delays, etc., but have them be more clean and not distorted by the front end of your amplifier. This is a great way to do it, and as far as I'm concerned, it's really the only way to do it. It really works well. I'm just completely dumbstruck by how good it sounds. Anyway, that's it. That's all I know for today. If you have any questions about this or anything else we do here at Granville Guitars, seek us out on the web at www.granvilleguitars.com. You can also find us on Facebook and also over on Instagram. And you can check out our blog, A View from the Granville Bench, over at WordPress. That's all I know for today. Everybody have a rockin' good day with zero loss.